Hi, I'm Kyle, and I'm so glad that after video one, you're excited to learn how you can use spiraling in your math class right now. This is the second of a three-part spiraling math class video series. In the first video, we learned what spiraling a math curriculum is, we shared one mathematician's perspective on how we learn best, and finally, the effect of spiraling on retention. If you happen to have missed the first video, there should be a link right underneath this one where you can go and watch that video before moving on. In this video, we'll explore 6 steps to start spiraling your math class right now. So let's dive right in. While many teachers have very different perspectives when it comes to getting started, from dipping your toes to diving in head first, I'd like to propose some steps that will help guide you along the way. Spiraling step number 1, know what you need to teach. In other words, know your curriculum. If you're brand new to teaching a grade or a course, trying to spiral for the first time will be challenging. That said, I'm not suggesting you don't attempt spiraling, but rather be aware that you will have to do some serious digging into the expectations or the standards that you're going to be teaching in order to plan and deliver your spiraled curriculum with confidence. In reality, the work you need to do up front to learn the curriculum should be done by every teacher, regardless of how you structure your long-range plan. Unfortunately, teaching in blocked units as they are in most textbooks can unintentionally make it possible for us to learn new curriculum one unit at a time. When faced with teaching a new grade or new courses, sometimes we can feel so overwhelmed that we tend to plan our year in small blocks or chunks, which we learned in video 1 is not ideal for student learning. Spiraling step number 2. Assess by learning goal or standards-based grading. When I attempted spiraling my grade 9 applied course for the first time, it was after I had been assessing students by learning goal and success criteria, or as some in the United States might call it, standards-based grading. I personally believe that by assessing in this manner, it forced me to really know and understand the curriculum I was teaching. Not only does this step serve as a way to ensure that step number 1 can be checked off your list, but this also has other benefits for your classroom beyond the spiraling of concepts. Assessing by learning goal is a great way to help identify where students are strong and where they need more support so that you can offer specific and timely feedback. By monitoring how students are doing based on the learning goals you have created for your course, this can help you determine how frequently to come back to concepts based on student understanding. Assessing a mark on a unit test alone is much less helpful when it comes to trying to determine what concepts we need to spiral back to, and can often lead us to attempting to reteach the entire unit, which wastes valuable class time rather than focusing on the specific topics where students are struggling. Spiraling step number 3, create topics, strands, or big ideas. I don't care what you call them. Some might like calling them topics or big ideas, while others might have their own creative names for them. Regardless of what you want to call them, you definitely want to look at your curriculum, the learning goals you've created, and start organizing them. The Ontario curriculum conveniently organizes our expectations into strands, so that's where I began my first time through spiraling my grade 9 applied course. I also decided to keep the name strands, although I had subdivided them into smaller groupings. Now that might sound confusing, especially if you're not from Ontario like I am, so let's have a closer look. Here's a glimpse of the Google Sheet I was using to organize my course, which I also share in the resources under this video. Luckily for me, John Orr was also interested in trying to spiral his grade 9 applied course at the same time, which made the process so much easier. While we were collaborating and helping each other think through how we might teach our courses, we would often go in different orders based on our own student learning needs. But we'd oftentimes be using the same tasks and lessons. Now, on the other hand, maybe you prefer planning with physical paper, like my colleague Jana LePage does when she prints out the curriculum, chops them up into individual expectations, and then after grouping them, she'll glue them to colored paper to help her see the big picture. Regardless of how you want to do it, I'd recommend coming up with a plan to organize your topics in a way that you think would be easiest for your own organizational style. Spiraling step number 4. Plan your cycles, spirals, or chunks. After you organize your topics, strands, or big ideas, you're going to want to think about how many times you'll come back to these concepts. Again, naming is not really that important. Alex Overwick, Mary Barassa, and many others like to call them cycles, while I sometimes refer to them as spirals. Heck, you might even decide you want to keep all your colleagues on staff confused for a cheap laugh and continue calling them units. By planning out your spirals, including how long each one will be and how many spirals you'd like to have in your course, you'll ultimately be planning out a long-range plan for your math class. It should be noted that you don't need each spiral to be the same length of time, and you definitely don't need to commit the same number of days to each topic. It's really up to you based on what you anticipate, and you're going to also have to make some changes depending on the needs of your future students. Spiraling step number 5, be comfortable with changing your plan. That last line from step number 4 is really important. If you're planning out your spiraled math course before the class has even begun, you haven't even met your students yet. The topics you anticipate students to breeze through, and some of the topics you anticipate students are going to struggle on, might not play out as originally planned. Expect to be confronted with making decisions between proceeding as planned or pivoting your plan based on the needs of your students. This means you should prepare yourself for the highly likely chance that you're going to have to modify your spirals to suit the needs of the learners in front of you. This might sound scary at first, but it really does help you dedicate the limited class time you have with your students to the concepts students need to work on the most. Spiraling step number 6, interleave your assessments. We're all assessing students through conversations and observations on a daily basis. However, if you're spiraling your course, it might seem hard to determine when you'll assess students with a written test or quiz and what questions you should be asking. Since we're spiraling the content of the course, it would make sense that the assessments are spiraled or interleaved as well. For me, I would give students an assessment on Mastery Day, which I would have on every Tuesday, and the assessment was called a check-in. For the first half of class, students would work on 4 to 6 questions, approximately half from ideas we worked with the previous week, and the other half would be from anything covered previously in the course. The intention here was to give me and the students a true understanding of where their understanding was related to those learning goals at the current time. There was no review day, and there was no list of concepts that they were to cram the night before. Just questions to give students the opportunity to build their retrieval strength and highlight areas that we should be focusing on together over the next week. After submitting their check-in, the second half of class would be used towards mastering a concept based on the feedback given on previous assessments. I would try my best to have feedback done for students by the next day, not only for this feedback to be timely for them, but to also help me determine whether I should continue the week as my spiral was planned, or whether I need to pivot and come back to an idea like, say, Pythagorean theorem because so many students struggled with it. There are also some positives that come from this, like realizing that my students really understand linear relations, and maybe I can cut a day out of the spiral to commit to something else. Now, although I have interleaving your assessments as the 6th step, I'll mention that you might want to also consider doing this after step 3. Maybe you're not feeling so ready to spiral your lessons, but you feel like maybe interleaving the content on your assessment might be something that you might be willing to try. This is also a step that might be easier to put into place during a school year or during a semester, whereas spiraling the content in your lessons might be thought of as a little bit more challenging if you've already begun teaching in blocks or units and you're feeling a little bit more reluctant to try. Thank you for joining me in the second of 3 videos in the Spiraling Math Class series, where we explored the 6 steps to start spiraling your math class now. Be sure to check out the resources where you can download a free printable cheat sheet that summarizes the 6 steps outlined in this video, as well as a planning template. If you haven't already, be sure to go back to video 1 to grab the cheat sheet that summarizes what spiraling is and why it's worth doing. It's a great resource that you might want to share with your administrator or maybe colleagues and even parents to help explain why you're considering organizing your courses in a non-traditional way. The third and final video in the Spiraling Math Class series will be released soon, so watch your email for details in order to learn 9 starter strategies you might consider doing immediately to start your spiraling journey. We'll see you then.